The first bullet shattered our kitchen window at 2:13 a.m. I grabbed Sarah off her chair, yanking her to the floor as the second shot splintered the wooden cabinet where her head had been seconds earlier. Glass rained down on us as I army crawled us toward the hallway, my wife's surgical hands, hands that had saved countless lives, now trembling against my chest. "He's really trying to kill us," she whispered, her blue eyes wide with disbelief. "That tends to happen when you expose a murderer," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady as I reached for my phone, "especially when that murderer is the most respected surgeon in 3 states. That's how our Tuesday ended. But to understand why Dr. Maxwell Reynolds, Harvard Medical School graduate, pioneer of minimally invasive cardiac techniques, and chief of surgery at Preston Memorial, was shooting up our home in the middle of the night, you need to hear about how our nightmare began 4 months earlier. My wife, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, wasn't just any surgeon. She was the surgeon people flew across the country to see when other doctors had given up. The surgeon who took on cases labeled inoperable and sent patients home healthy. The surgeon who worked 20-hour shifts during the highway pileup last winter and saved 17 lives that should have been lost. I'd watched her perform the impossible time after time. Come home exhausted but victorious, hold herself together through marathon surgeries, then cry in our shower over the patients she couldn't save. She carried the weight of every life that passed through her operating room. That's why I knew, without a doubt, that she could never have been responsible for what happened to Ethan Miller. Dr. Maxwell Reynolds swept into Preston Memorial on the first Monday in March, bringing with him a reputation that preceded him like a trumpet fanfare. Tall, silver-haired, with practiced charm, and the casual confidence of a man who had never been told no in his professional life. The hospital board had recruited him aggressively, offering a salary that made headlines in medical circles. At the welcome reception, Reynolds worked the room like a politician, memorizing names, asking personal questions that made each person feel uniquely seen. When he reached us, his eyes lingered on Sarah a beat too long. "The famous Dr. Mitchell," he said, his handshake firm, but his touch lingering. "Your work on the Sanchez twins separation was brilliant. I've followed your career with great interest." "Thank you," Sarah replied professionally. "Your paper on cardiac valve repair techniques changed our approach to pediatric cases. We should discuss it sometime, perhaps over dinner." His smile remained fixed on Sarah, as if I weren't standing right beside her. Later that night, Sarah dismissed my concerns. "That's just how these guys are, especially the old guard. They flirt with anything female wearing a lab coat. It doesn't mean anything." I wish I'd pushed harder, noticed the warning signs sooner. Within 3 weeks, Reynolds had insinuated himself into every aspect of Sarah's professional life. He rescheduled department meetings to conflict with her surgeries, then criticized her absence. He questioned her treatment plans in front of residents. He found reasons to touch her shoulder, her back, her arm during conversations. "It's like he's marking his territory," Sarah told me one night, anger simmering beneath her normally calm exterior. "Today, he actually said, 'A beautiful woman like you shouldn't have to work so hard. The right mentor could make your career so much easier.'" "You need to report him," I insisted. "And say what? That he stands too close? That his compliments feel wrong? Do you know how many female surgeons have tanked their careers by complaining about behavior that can be explained away as friendly or mentoring?" She wasn't wrong, but as the weeks passed, Reynolds grew bolder. He began changing her medication orders after she'd left for the day, reassigning her favorite scrub nurses to other surgeons. Small sabotages designed to make her look incompetent or difficult. Sarah documented everything meticulously. Screenshots of altered orders, emails questioning his decisions that went unanswered, testimonials from nurses who'd witnessed his behavior. "I'm building a case no one can ignore," she explained. "When I go to the board, it won't be my word against his. It'll be evidence they can't dismiss." The breaking point came 8 weeks after Reynolds' arrival. Sarah had been scheduled to perform a delicate neurosurgery on 16-year-old Ethan Miller, a procedure to remove a benign tumor pressing on his brainstem. She had spent weeks planning the approach, consulting with colleagues across the country. The night before surgery, Reynolds called an emergency department meeting and informed everyone that he would be taking over Ethan's case. This type of procedure requires experience that Dr. Mitchell simply doesn't have. he announced to the stunned room. Sarah fought back. I've performed this exact procedure 6 times with excellent outcomes. I've been working with Ethan and his family for weeks. The board agrees with my assessment, Reynolds replied smoothly. The schedule has been changed. You can observe if you'd like to learn something. That night, Sarah barely slept. There's something wrong about this, she kept saying. Reynolds doesn't even specialize in neurosurgery. His taking this case makes no medical sense. Against my advice, Sarah went to the hospital at 5 a.m., 3 hours before Ethan's scheduled surgery. She found Reynolds in his office, reviewing the case file. What is this really about? She demanded. We both know you're not the best surgeon for Ethan. According to Sarah, Reynolds didn't even look up. It's about knowing your place, Sarah. You've rejected my mentorship, my advice, my dinner invitations. Actions have consequences. You're risking a teenager's life to punish me for not sleeping with you? That got his attention. Be very careful about throwing around accusations you can't back up. No one would believe you anyway. Now get out of my OR. Sarah had a choice, back down or fight. She chose to fight. She went directly to Ethan's parents, who were waiting anxiously in the pre-op area. She explained carefully, professionally, that there had been a last-minute change in surgeons. And while Dr. Reynolds was certainly qualified, he did not specialize in neurosurgery. If it were my child, she told them, I would request the surgeon with the most relevant experience. The Millers immediately demanded that Sarah perform the surgery as originally planned. Hospital administration was called. Reynolds arrived, furious but maintaining a veneer of professionalism in front of the family. After a heated discussion, the hospital director sided with the Millers. Sarah would perform the surgery as scheduled, with Reynolds supervising. The procedure was tense but successful. Sarah removed the tumor with minimal disruption to surrounding tissue. Ethan's vitals remained stable throughout. When she closed, the prognosis looked excellent. Reynolds was coldly professional during the surgery, making occasional suggestions that Sarah suspected were designed to throw her off rather than help. When they finished, he left without a word. It's over, Sarah told me that night, relief evident in her voice. I stood my ground, the surgery went perfectly, and now maybe Reynolds will back off. She couldn't have been more wrong. 2 days later, Ethan Miller developed a massive intracranial hemorrhage and died before Sarah could even get to the hospital. Reynolds had been on call when Ethan's condition deteriorated. Sarah was devastated. She reviewed every moment of the surgery in her mind, searching for any mistake she might have made. But she was certain. The procedure had gone flawlessly. The post-operative scans had shown no signs of bleeding. Then came the official cause of death: surgical error. According to Reynolds' report, Sarah had nicked a small vessel during tumor removal. The slow leak had eventually led to catastrophic bleeding. The hospital suspended Sarah pending a full investigation. The Millers, grief-stricken and angry, were already talking to lawyers about a malpractice suit. Reynolds expressed deep professional concern about Sarah's surgical judgment and technique. That night, I found Sarah sitting at our kitchen table, staring at nothing, a half-empty bottle of bourbon beside her. He did something to that boy, she whispered when I sat down across from her. The surgery was perfect. The post-op scans were clean. Ethan was stable when I checked on him before leaving. You think Reynolds harmed him deliberately? The idea seemed unthinkable, a violation of every medical oath and human decency. I think he saw an opportunity to destroy me and took it. Her voice was hollow. And I think he's done this before. That's when our real fight began. The next morning, I called in sick to my engineering firm and drove to Preston Memorial with one goal: finding proof that would clear Sarah's name. In the parking garage, I ran into Melissa Jenkins, one of Sarah's favorite scrub nurses. Nathan, she said, looking nervously over her shoulder. How is she? Fighting, I replied. Melissa, Sarah believes Reynolds may have done something to Ethan after surgery. Melissa's face paled. I'm not supposed to talk to either of you during the investigation. Please, my wife's career is being destroyed. If you know something, meet me at Denny's when my shift ends. 8 p.m. She hurried away before I could thank her. 12 hours later, in a corner booth far from other diners, Melissa confirmed our worst fears. Reynolds ordered everyone out of Ethan's ICU room yesterday for what he called a detailed examination. It's not standard protocol, but no one questions the chief of surgery. She twisted her napkin anxiously. When I came back, I noticed Ethan's intracranial pressure monitor had been recalibrated. Again, unusual, but not unheard of. Except Reynolds didn't document the recalibration. Could that have masked early signs of bleeding? It could have hidden a lot of things. She leaned forward. Nathan, 2 nurses have quit since Reynolds arrived. Both women. Both after late-night mentoring sessions in his office that left them in tears. Has anyone reported him? To who? He's best friends with the hospital director. Plays golf with half the board. Reynolds is untouchable. No one is untouchable, I said, with more confidence than I felt. The OR recordings, Melissa said suddenly. Every surgery is recorded for training and liability purposes. If Sarah's surgery went as perfectly as she claims, the footage would prove it. How do we access it? You don't. It's restricted to risk management and legal. But she wrote something on a napkin and slid it across the table. Dylan Perez in IT owes me a favor. Tell him I sent you but never mentioned my name to anyone else. Before I could respond, Melissa's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her face went white. What's wrong? I asked. Someone saw us talking in the parking garage. Reynolds is asking questions. She stood abruptly. I need to go. Be careful, Nathan. This goes deeper than you think. What do you mean? Reynolds isn't just one bad doctor. He's part of something bigger. She glanced around nervously. 3 hospitals in 5 years. Each time he leaves after a tragic incident that somehow enhances his reputation while destroying a female colleague's career. It's a pattern, and someone's protecting him. As she rushed out, I noticed a man in a dark suit at the counter, watching us with undisguised interest. When our eyes met, he didn't look away, just smiled coldly and lifted his coffee cup in a mock toast. Finding Dylan proved challenging. He wasn't listed in the hospital directory, and security had been increased since the incident, as everyone now called Ethan's death. After 3 days of careful surveillance, I spotted a young man matching Melissa's description entering a service door near the hospital's data center. Dylan Perez, I called, jogging to catch up. He turned, wariness immediately evident in his posture. Who's asking? Nathan Mitchell. Melissa Jenkins said you might be able to help me. His expression remained guarded, but he jerked his head toward the service door. Not here. Inside, surrounded by humming servers, Dylan spoke in a low, rapid voice. I know why you're here. The answer is no. I'm not risking my job for you. My wife is being framed for killing a child, I said bluntly. All I need is access to the OR recording to prove her surgery was perfect. Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't. Reynolds had the original footage transferred to his private server, then deleted from the main database. Said it was for the investigation. My heart sank. So it's gone? I didn't say that. Dylan glanced at his watch nervously. Look, I do system backups every night at 2 a.m. The footage from Ethan's surgery was still on the main server during that night's backup. Technically, that backup still exists in our archives. Can you retrieve it? Accessing archive backups requires executive authorization, but he hesitated. There's a vulnerability in our system I've been meaning to patch. Creates a backdoor to the archives. If someone knew about that vulnerability, they might be able to exploit it. Someone like me? I'm not saying anything. He scribbled something on a scrap of paper. This conversation never happened. And if you use this information, make damn sure nothing leads back to me. Reynolds isn't someone you want as an enemy. As I turned to leave, Dylan grabbed my arm. One more thing. I've been monitoring Reynolds' server activity. He's accessed Ethan's records 17 times since the death. Each time he makes subtle changes. Timestamps altered, notes modified. He's creating a digital trail to support his version of events. Can you prove that? Maybe. Every change leaves a digital fingerprint if you know where to look. But he stopped suddenly, head tilted toward the door. Someone's coming. Go, now. I slipped out through a back exit just as voices approached, heart racing. As I crossed the parking lot, I noticed my tire was flat, and not accidentally. A clean puncture mark was visible in the sidewall. Someone wanted me stranded at the hospital. I called a rideshare and waited nervously in the hospital cafeteria, feeling exposed under the fluorescent lights. 2 security guards entered, scanned the room, and spoke into their radios. They weren't looking for shoplifters. I abandoned my coffee and slipped out through the kitchen, earning confused looks from the staff. Outside, I ducked behind a delivery truck just as the same dark-suited man from the diner walked past, speaking urgently into his phone. My ride arrived, and I kept my head down as we pulled away from the hospital. In the side mirror, I saw the man in the suit pointing at our departing car. That night, someone broke into our apartment while we were at a hotel across town, a precaution I'd insisted on after seeing the flat tire. They ransacked the place but took nothing. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe. 2 nights later, using the access information Dylan had provided, I downloaded the original recording of Ethan's surgery to a secure drive. Sarah and I watched it together in a different hotel room, her trained eyes catching details mine missed. The footage confirmed everything Sarah had said. The surgery was textbook perfect. No nicked vessels, no complications. Ethan was stable when they closed, but the recording continued after Sarah left. It showed Reynolds returning to the recovery room alone. He checked that no one was watching, then deliberately adjusted equipment, injected something into Ethan's IV, and manipulated the surgical site itself. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her face ashen. "He created a slow bleed. He murdered that boy to destroy my career." As the footage continued, I noticed something Sarah missed, a reflection in the glass cabinet behind Reynolds. Someone else was in the room watching from the doorway, someone in an expensive suit. "There," I said, pausing the video. "He wasn't alone." Sarah leaned closer. "That's Richard Westbrook, the hospital's legal counsel. What's he doing in a patient's room?" "Being an accomplice," I said grimly. "This goes beyond Reynolds. The hospital knows what he does." We had the proof, but using it presented a dangerous dilemma. The footage had been obtained illegally. If we took it directly to the police, it could be ruled inadmissible, and we'd face charges ourselves for unauthorized access to medical records. We needed a strategy that would force an official review of the original footage without revealing how we'd obtained our copy. "The Millers," Sarah said suddenly. "They deserve to know what really happened to their son." Contacting Ethan's parents was risky. The hospital had explicitly forbidden Sarah from reaching out during the investigation. But as I pointed out, what more could they do to her? She was already suspended, her reputation in tatters. That night, as we prepared to meet the Millers, a breaking news alert flashed across my phone. "Nurse found unconscious in hospital parking garage." The accompanying photo showed Melissa Jenkins being loaded into an ambulance. "That's not a coincidence," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "They're eliminating witnesses." I called the hospital posing as Melissa's cousin. A sympathetic nurse told me she'd been found with a head injury consistent with an attack, not an accident. She was in critical condition. When we arrived at the cafe to meet Janet Miller, we found her already seated with a man we didn't recognize. Tall, grim-faced, with the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. "Mr. and Dr. Mitchell," Janet said tensely. "This is my brother, Detective James Miller, State Police, Major Crimes Unit." I hesitated, hand instinctively moving toward the USB drive in my pocket. "It's okay," Janet assured us. "Jim knows everything. I told him what you said about Reynolds. He's here to help." Detective Miller's expression remained stony. "My sister says you have evidence that Reynolds deliberately harmed my nephew. If that's true, I need to see it. Now." We showed them the footage on my laptop. Janet watched in rigid silence, her coffee untouched before her. Detective Miller's face grew progressively darker, jaw muscles working as he clenched his teeth. "Why?" Janet finally asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would he do this to my boy?" "Because I rejected his advances," Sarah said simply. "Because I said no." Janet's expression hardened from grief to fury in an instant. "You're telling me this doctor murdered my son because of his ego?" "Yes, and I believe he's done it before." Detective Miller closed the laptop with a sharp snap. "How did you obtain this footage?" I hesitated. "I'm not at liberty to say." "Illegally, then." He rubbed his face, "which makes it problematic as evidence." "Jim," Janet pleaded, "you saw what he did." "And I'll nail the bastard to the wall for it," he promised. "But we need to do this right. No technicalities that let him walk." He turned to us. "I need everything you have on Reynolds. Previous incidents, other victims, accomplices, everything." "There's more," I said, telling him about Melissa Jenkins' attack and Dylan's information about Reynolds altering records. And the hospital counsel was there when Reynolds tampered with Ethan's surgical site. Miller's expression darkened further. Conspiracy and obstruction charges, then. I'll need a warrant for the hospital's servers, all OR footage, personnel files. He was already making notes. They'll destroy evidence once they know you're investigating, Sarah warned. Not if we move fast enough. He stood abruptly. Go home. Pack what you need. You're both in protective custody as of now. Protective custody? I echoed. Someone just tried to kill your primary witness, he said bluntly. You think you're not next on the list? My men will take you to a safe house. Nobody moves without an escort until Reynolds is in custody. Within 48 hours, the Massachusetts Medical Board had issued an emergency suspension of Reynolds' license and opened an investigation. Preston Memorial was served with subpoenas for all records related to Ethan's case, including the supposedly lost original surgical footage. Reynolds' reaction was swift and vicious. He filed a defamation lawsuit against Sarah. He held a press conference declaring his innocence and suggesting Sarah had doctored footage to frame him. He called in favors with influential colleagues who vouched for his character in medical journals and newspapers. Then things got worse. Despite the police protection, Reynolds' reach extended further than we anticipated. The safe house location was compromised when a rookie officer mentioned it on an unsecured channel. We evacuated just 20 minutes before armed men arrived, according to the surveillance cameras Detective Miller had installed. We moved to a second location, then a third. Each time, Reynolds seemed to be one step behind us, but getting closer. First came the brake lines on Sarah's police escort vehicle, cut just enough to fail gradually rather than immediately. If the detective driving hadn't noticed unusual brake behavior and pulled over to check, they might have died on the mountain roads outside the city. Then our protective detail discovered a listening device hidden in Sarah's purse, planted when we couldn't be sure. Our conversations, our plans, our movements, all potentially compromised. The threatening calls began next, somehow reaching phones that only law enforcement should have known about. Drop this now, or the next patient to die will be someone you love. Back off, or that pretty face of hers won't be recognizable. Accidents happen every day. Some are even survivable. How is he doing this? Sarah asked Detective Miller one night, frustration evident in her voice. It's like he has eyes and ears everywhere. Because he does, Miller replied grimly. Reynolds isn't just one corrupt doctor. He's connected, politically, financially. My captain received a call from the governor's office today, expressing concern about our investigation. Reynolds' brother-in-law is the lieutenant governor. So we're fighting the whole system? I asked. Parts of it, but we have something they don't. He tapped the USB drive containing the surgical footage. Irrefutable proof. That proof became even stronger when Dylan Perez came forward, having survived an attempt on his life that left him with a broken arm and concussion. He brought with him an encrypted file documenting every change Reynolds had made to Ethan's medical records after death. Digital fingerprints that proved deliberate tampering. Melissa Jenkins regained consciousness after 6 days in a coma. Her first words to detectives, Reynolds, he was there when I was attacked. He watched. The circle was tightening, but as Reynolds grew more desperate, he became more dangerous. 3 weeks into the investigation, I was followed home from a meeting with Janet Miller's brother. 2 men in a black SUV tailed me for miles, staying just close enough to make their presence known. When I pulled into a police station parking lot, they drove past slowly, one man lifting his hand in a mocking wave. The message was clear. Reynolds had resources beyond the hospital, connections that reached into dark places, and he was willing to use them. That night, as Sarah and I discussed the next steps with Detective Miller, someone broke into our original safe house. The security system was professionally disabled. Nothing was taken, but the hard drive containing our backup copy of the surgical footage was destroyed. On the bedroom mirror, written in what looked disturbingly like blood, "No one will believe you." He's getting desperate, Miller observed, studying crime scene photos. That's good and bad. Good because desperate people make mistakes. Bad because they're unpredictable. We moved to an unmarked cabin in the mountains with a rotating team of officers Miller personally vetted. No phones, no internet, no contact with the outside world except through Miller himself. Meanwhile, the investigation expanded. With Melissa's testimony and Dylan's evidence, detectives secured warrants for Reynolds' personal and financial records. They discovered offshore accounts, payments to known criminals, and communications with hospital executives discussing problem employees who needed career adjustments. Reynolds wasn't just a predator, he was the public face of a sophisticated operation that silenced whistleblowers and protected powerful interests in the medical establishment. When female doctors or nurses raised concerns about fraud, malpractice, or harassment, Reynolds was brought in to discredit them in the most devastating way possible, by making them responsible for patient deaths. The medical board hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Reynolds arrived with a team of attorneys, looking confident despite the mounting evidence against him. The hospital's legal team was there, clearly uncomfortable with their position defending a doctor now under criminal investigation. Janet Miller sat in the front row, flanked by her brother and a stone-faced detective from the state police. Sarah testified first, her voice steady as she recounted her perfect surgery and Reynolds' pattern of harassment. Reynolds' attorneys attacked her credibility, suggesting she had made a grave surgical error and was now trying to blame their client to save her career. Then came the bombshell. Janet Miller's brother called a surprise witness, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, former surgical resident at Massachusetts General Hospital, where Reynolds had worked before Preston Memorial. Dr. Warren, the prosecutor began, could you please tell the board why you left your residency at Mass General 3 years ago? Elizabeth's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained firm. I rejected Dr. Reynolds' sexual advances. 2 weeks later, a patient died following a routine procedure I performed. Reynolds claimed I had made a critical error, though the surgery had gone perfectly. I was placed on probation. My career effectively ended before it began. And did you believe Dr. Reynolds had done something to your patient? Yes, but I had no proof. No one believed me, a resident over the great Maxwell Reynolds. What made you come forward now? When I saw the news about Ethan Miller and Dr. Mitchell, I recognized the pattern. Then last week I received this. She held up a thumb drive. Anonymous, delivered to my apartment. It contains security footage from my patient's room showing Reynolds entering after hours, just like with Ethan Miller. Reynolds exploded. This is a conspiracy. These women are working together to destroy me. That footage is fabricated. His outburst only made him look more guilty. When the board called a recess to review both videos, Reynolds' attorneys huddled around him, clearly concerned by this turn of events. In the hallway, I asked Sarah, did you send that footage to Dr. Warren? No, she whispered. I've never even met her. We later learned the anonymous package had been sent by a nurse from Mass General who had suspected Reynolds for years but feared coming forward alone. As the hearing resumed, a commotion erupted outside the boardroom. The doors burst open, and Richard Westbrook, Preston Memorial's legal counsel, who had been in the room during Reynolds' tampering, staggered in, blood streaming from a wound on his forehead. He tried to kill me, Westbrook gasped, pointing at Reynolds, in the parking garage. Said I was a liability now. Chaos erupted. Reynolds lunged for the exit, shoving aside security. In the confusion, I lost sight of Sarah. Then a scream cut through the noise. Reynolds had grabbed her, pressing a scalpel to her throat. Nobody moves, he snarled, backing toward the door. She's coming with me. The room froze. Detective Miller had his weapon drawn but couldn't risk a shot with Sarah in the way. Let her go, Reynolds, Miller said evenly. There's nowhere to run. There's always somewhere to run when you have money, Reynolds replied, tightening his grip on Sarah. And influence, and people who owe you favors. I watched helplessly as he backed out of the room, dragging my wife with him. Her eyes locked with mine, and in them I saw not fear, but determination. As they reached the doorway, Sarah suddenly went limp, dropping her weight unexpectedly. Reynolds instinctively adjusted his grip, and in that split second, Sarah drove her elbow hard into his solar plexus. He doubled over, and she twisted away, the scalpel slicing a shallow cut across her collarbone. Miller tackled Reynolds before he could recover. 3 other officers piled on, subduing him despite his frenzied struggles. As they led Reynolds away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with me. This isn't over, he hissed. People like you don't win against people like me. But he was wrong. The board didn't just reinstate Sarah's license. They issued a formal apology and referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Reynolds was denied bail, deemed both a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. That should have been the end. Justice served, career saved, monster locked away. But Reynolds had friends, powerful friends who believed his version of events or, more likely, feared their own secrets coming to light if they didn't support him. His expensive legal team found a sympathetic judge who reversed the bail decision on a technicality. Which brings us back to that Tuesday night, bullets shattering our kitchen window as we crouched on the floor, glass raining down around us. "Police are on their way," I told Sarah, ending the 911 call. "We need to move." We crawled to the bedroom, where I retrieved the gun Detective Miller had insisted I keep after Reynolds' release. I'd never fired it outside of a shooting range, had never imagined I'd need to use it in our home. But as we heard the front door splinter, I knew our lives depended on it. "Bathroom," I whispered to Sarah. "Lock yourself in, get in the tub, stay down." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted, grabbing a heavy crystal paperweight from the nightstand. A poor weapon against bullets, but better than nothing. We heard footsteps in our hallway, 2 sets moving slowly, methodically, not even trying to be quiet. Reynolds' voice, slightly slurred but unmistakable. "Sarah? Nathan? Come out, wherever you are. We need to have a little chat about consequences." A second voice, unfamiliar, laughed softly. "Just make it quick, Doc. In and out, like you said." I positioned myself beside the bedroom door, gun raised, heart thundering so loudly I was certain they could hear it. Sarah pressed herself against the wall on the opposite side, paperweight clutched in white-knuckled hands. The doorknob turned slowly. Time seemed to compress. The door swung open. A shadow fell across the threshold. I didn't hesitate. 3 shots, center mass, just as the instructor had taught. The unfamiliar man, a hulking figure in dark clothing, collapsed backward with a surprised grunt. Reynolds' voice came from further down the hallway. "Carlton, what happened?" Then sirens, blessed sirens, wailing in the distance, but growing closer. Reynolds swore violently. We heard retreating footsteps, the squeal of tires on asphalt. When the police arrived 3 minutes later, they found us still in our defensive positions, me with the gun now safely pointed at the floor, Sarah pale but composed as she applied pressure to the wounded man's chest. Surgeon to the core, even for someone who had come to kill her. "Reynolds," the man gasped as paramedics loaded him into an ambulance, "paid me 50 grand to make it look like home invasion gone wrong." He didn't survive the trip to the hospital. Reynolds fled, abandoning his luxury car at a bus station and disappearing for 9 agonizing days. A manhunt spread across 4 states. His face appeared on digital billboards, news broadcasts, and social media feeds. Tips flooded in. Reynolds spotted at a gas station in Connecticut, at a diner in New York, boarding a private plane in New Jersey. Each lead was investigated, each sighting confirming he was moving south. The theory was Mexico, then a private flight to a country without extradition. But Reynolds' network was unraveling. Associates, facing charges themselves, began cooperating with authorities. His financial accounts were frozen. His passport was flagged. The net tightened. When authorities finally caught him trying to cross into Canada with a fake passport, the opposite direction from what was expected, he had transformed from the polished, confident surgeon into a haggard fugitive, wild-eyed and desperate. In his possession, a notebook containing detailed plans to reach Sarah, even in protective custody. The trial became a national sensation. 3 more former colleagues came forward with stories of harassment, followed by suspicious patient complications. 2 families whose loved ones had died under Reynolds' care pushed for their cases to be reopened. Evidence mounted of a systemic pattern. Reynolds targeting female medical professionals who rejected him, creating catastrophic patient outcomes to discredit them, then moving to a new hospital with glowing recommendations, and financial kickbacks to administrators who helped cover up his actions. The hospital's complicity could no longer be denied. Email chains showed executives discussing handling the Mitchell situation and containing potential liability from Reynolds' methods. Richard Westbrook, the legal counsel who had finally turned on Reynolds, provided testimony that implicated half the hospital board in the cover-up. Reynolds' defense collapsed when his personal assistant, fearing her own criminal exposure, turned over text messages showing Reynolds had hired the man who attacked us, along with records of large cash withdrawals matching the payment amount. The jury took less than 4 hours to find him guilty on all counts. Second-degree murder for Ethan Miller, attempted murder for Sarah and me, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and various charges related to his previous victims. The judge, clearly disgusted by Reynolds' abuse of his position, imposed the maximum sentence on every count to be served consecutively. Reynolds would spend the rest of his life in prison. In a separate federal case, 6 hospital executives faced charges ranging from conspiracy to accessory after the fact. Preston Memorial itself was hit with the largest medical fraud settlement in state history, required to implement sweeping reforms and submit to a decade of independent oversight. In his final statement before sentencing, Reynolds showed no remorse. He looked directly at Sarah and said, "You could have had everything. Instead, you chose this." Sarah stood, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I chose truth. I chose justice for that boy whose life you took. I chose to be someone who can still face herself in the mirror each morning. You're the one who lost everything, Maxwell, and you have no one to blame but yourself." Preston Memorial offered Sarah her position back, along with a substantial settlement and the title of Chief of Surgery, Reynolds' former role. Their press release praised her courage and integrity in the face of unimaginable circumstances. She declined. "I can't work somewhere that valued prestige over patient safety," she told me as we packed our belongings. "Somewhere that would have buried the truth to protect their reputation." Instead, Sarah founded the Ethan Miller Center for Surgical Excellence, a teaching hospital with the motto "Integrity above all." Janet Miller joined as patient advocate, ensuring that every family received complete transparency about their loved one's care. They specialized in high-risk cases other surgeons deemed too dangerous, the very cases that had made Sarah's reputation in the first place. Within a year, patients were traveling from across the country to be treated by the surgeon who chose truth over power. The center implemented unprecedented safeguards, continuous recording of all medical areas, multiple person verification of post-op care, and an ethics board with real authority. Sarah's protocols became a model adopted by hospitals nationwide. Elizabeth Warren, the former resident whose career Reynolds had destroyed, became the center's research director. Melissa Jenkins, after recovering from her attack, joined as head surgical nurse. Dylan Perez designed state-of-the-art security systems that protected both patients and whistleblowers. Together, they created something revolutionary, a medical institution that valued transparency over prestige, patient outcomes over politics, and ethical behavior over financial gain. As for me, I left engineering to handle the center's security and operations. After what we'd been through, I wasn't about to trust anyone else with my wife's safety or the integrity of her work. We still have nightmares sometimes. Sarah still flinches at unexpected noises. I still check our home security system 3 times each night. Some wounds leave permanent scars, visible or not.